Hey everyone, we are here at our worship center in Ankeny, Iowa, and so one of the things that we were trying to figure out and could not for the life of us fully figure out was how to make our Waves LV1 system talk with our Ableton session that we launch from stage. So here's a scenario that we are typically in on every Sunday morning. We've got on stage, we've got our Ableton session that we're running tracks from, and those are all sending over the sound grid to our LV1. But we also wanted to send some scene changes to the LV1 to change the WavesTune, and so the key that it's in, everything like that. So we wanted that to be real time when we launched our tracks. And in theory, it sounded easy, but for some reason, we could not figure out the MIDI over Ethernet and why things weren't talking. We have a Mac up on stage, and so we were trying to figure out how to send MIDI cues over Ethernet from a Mac to the PC that our Waves LV1 is on. So we want to kind of just dive in and show you everything step by step of how we made that work. And so the first thing that you need on Mac, this is native, but on a PC, it doesn't come with this. So there's this software called RTP Midi. And we can maybe link this in the video, or you can just Google it. RTP Midi, it shows up. This is the very similar window that you'll see on a Mac. They're a native MIDI, audio MIDI setup on a Mac. So it looks really similar. And you've got your directory of all of the computers that are on your network. And then so we created a session. So this is front of house LV1 session. So this looks really similar. This is very mirrored on the Mac that we've got. One of the things that we couldn't figure out though initially is in the directory we couldn't see anything. We could connect to it from the other. We could connect to the LV1 from another computer, but we couldn't connect to anything from the LV1 to our Ableton session. And there is one thing. We had everything seemingly working right, at least in our mind, and it still wasn't sending any data over to the LV1. There's one thing that we finally figured out that we couldn't find anywhere online, and it had to do with the firewall on the PC. And so it's this, yes. So in here, if you go to your settings, your control panel, and then firewall, this window should pop up. And there's this button here, allow an app or feature through Windows Defender Firewall. If you click that, this Bonjour services, this allows you to see the name or the directory of computers in that RTP Midi. So we had to make sure that we checked that, and then come out of there. And then we'll go over to the LV1, and in here, in our setup, this is our MIDI. So you gotta make a MIDI device in here. This is the settings that we've got for our MIDI device that makes it work. And so the output port needs to be set to none. Otherwise, what we found is it just created this MIDI loop, and it ended up just crashing the LV1 every time we tried to send a MIDI program change. And so we've got it following program changes, input, front of house LV1, and that seems to work for us. And then on the show, we'll get to the Ableton session in just a second, but what you've got here is you've got your scenes, and each one of these that are numbered is reflected in the program change that we send from a MIDI device, in our case Ableton. So if we're sending program change 1, it's going to select scene 1. Program change 2, select key of A. Every time we launch LV1, you also need to come back into the show and make sure MIDI, this button right here, is selected. That's going to be listening for the MIDI cues that will be coming in. All right, so on our Ableton computer, we'll jump into the audio MIDI setup. There's a ton of videos online of how to make these connections happen, but I'll just show you how we're doing it pretty quick. Go to audio MIDI setup, the window, show MIDI studio, and then this button here shows the network setup. So in here, I've got my session. So this is my computer right here. And in my directory, see, I see front house LV1. So I'm going to select that and hit connect. This looks very similar to what it looked like on the LV1. And now we're connected to LV1 through the network. So over on Ableton, first thing you want to do is you want to just go to Ableton settings and make sure under this tab in MIDI that your output network, I've got all three of these checked. I think you just need remote and track selected, but I always get confused on which one's which, so I just got them all checked. And so you want to make sure that those are enabled though. And then in here, blank Ableton session. I made these MIDI clips for each of the scenes that we had pre-made on the LV1. And so if you don't know how to do this, you just make a MIDI clip like this and right click and hit insert MIDI clip. And in here on the left, down here at the inspector, you can scroll down to this launch tab. And in here, there's a bank, a sub, and a program. Right there is where you're going to need to put your program change. So for instance, if we've got the key of A on our LV1 was scene 2. If I wanted to make that, I would just type 2 in that program change. And now every time I hit this MIDI clip, if the MIDI output is set to my network, channel 1, that's setting to the front of house LV1 system. Anytime I hit this, it will automatically change the LV1 system to the key of A. And so then I just renamed this and dragged it into this folder so that I can quickly come back here and just drag in whatever keys we want. So if we did this right, if I hit this MIDI clip right now, this will change the LV1 to the key of D. And yep. So you see that there, the key of D. Let me change it there so you can see it. I'm going to change it to E right now. E. Yep. So it's worked flawlessly for us, and it also takes the BPM. So if you've got like a delay or anything that you want, it's not perfect. I don't know why. The information that we found out, it was like 4 to 5 BPM difference. So, but now our delays are almost synced up every time we launch a song, that we can just kind of like push up our delay and it's matched up with the song. And so it's really helped our workflow, the things we've already been doing from the stage of launching tracks and allowing things to be a little bit more seamless from front of house to the stage. So hopefully that's helpful. If you have any other questions or want to know anything else about how we make this work, feel free to let us know.